Right, so get ready, because we are diving deep into the critical reactions to Joker, Folie, Deux, and, well, let's just say the reactions are interesting. I'm sure many of you requested this deep dive feeling a little bewildered, and you know what? You're not alone. This film has generated a lot of buzz, but it's less like a buzz and more like everyone's yelling over each other about it. But don't worry, because we're not here to spoil anything for those of you who haven't seen it yet. Instead, we're going to unpack why the critics are reacting to this sequel in such different ways, focusing mainly on the themes and, that whole musical thing. We're not going to get bogged down in the technical stuff. It's not really what we do here. So, quick refresher for anyone who maybe hasn't seen the first Joker in a while. In the first film, we went deep, like deep into the mind of Arthur Fleck, a guy who's dealing with mental illness, societal neglect, and a whole lot of personal demons. And it's safe to say that film's exploration of how someone becomes a symbol of chaos really resonated. And now we have Folie, Deux. And, well, things get interesting.
One of the most interesting things about the reviews is this kind of, paradoxical reaction to the film. One source called it popular hatred. People hate it, but it's popular to hate it. But then you have another critic calling the film, get this, an intriguing and moody vessel for a fascinating message. I mean, how can people have such different opinions? What do you think?
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, how do you even...
Exactly.
But no.
And then there's the elephant in the room, or should we say the singing, dancing Joker in the room. Because who on earth could have predicted that this sequel would be, wait for it, a musical?
A musical.
I know. One critic even called it sluggish. And not like in a cool, methodical Joker kind of way. They said that the musical numbers, while interesting on paper, just felt bloated and unnecessary, which honestly we're seeing that a lot. So I have to ask, did this unexpected musical direction throw you for a loop like it seems to have thrown everyone else?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't even on my radar. It really makes you wonder if director Todd Phillips was trying to, I don't know, get the same kind of strong reactions that the first one got, almost like he was trying to mess with what people expected,
Yeah, almost like he was saying, you want Joker, here's Joker.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah. Oh.
It's a bold move for sure. And actually, speaking of bold moves, one critic basically said that this whole film feels like a giant screw you. To anyone who maybe, didn't understand the message of the original Joker.
Yeah, right.
That's something else.
It is.
Strong words.
Very strong. And that actually leads us perfectly into another big point of contention around this film. A lot of critics are saying that the sequel's attempt to kind of deconstruct this Arthur Fleck as a folk hero thing, the thing that some viewers really latched onto in the first film.
Right.
That attempt is way too heavy-handed, like almost preachy, you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
And one review actually talked about a courtroom scene with a character named Gary as being a prime example of this. Apparently there's a glimmer of some decent commentary in that scene, a chance to really get into the weeds of how audiences perceive things. But then the film just abandons it, like it got distracted or something.
Like a half-finished thought.
Yes.
Or like the director just gave up. It's like it gives you this little taste of something interesting and then takes it away. So since we're talking about things that feel a little off, can we talk about the musical format? Because I have to be honest, I'm still wrapping my head around it. One critic said that the idea was interesting, but they didn't like how it was done. Like they weren't fully committed to the bit. What do you think about that?
It's interesting you say that because that word committed, a lot of critics are using that word.
Really?
Yeah, the film was scared to really be a musical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was dipping its toes in the water but didn't really want to jump in the pool.
Exactly. Like they had all these musical ideas, but they were afraid to really go for it.
Yeah, and a lot of them point to the lack of, those big dance numbers you see in other musicals.
Right.
And it's funny because the courtroom scene we talked about earlier, that's actually one of the few times people really like the music.
It's like the one time the film actually embraced being a musical and it worked.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so weird. It's like they were trying to make a musical, but also trying not to make a musical at the same time.
Right.
And speaking of things that don't quite work, one review I read actually used the word riz to describe the musical numbers.
Riz.
I know, right?
Like charisma.
Yeah, like they said the musical numbers just lacked that extra something, that spark.
Huh, riz.
I never thought I'd be talking about riz in relation to the Joker, but here we are.
Wild.
It is pretty wild.
Okay.
But anyway, moving on from the music itself, another common complaint is that the film just doesn't have a lot to say
you know? Like, a lot of critics are saying that it leans too heavily on the first film. Like, it's just rehashing old ideas instead of bringing something new to the table.
It's like the sequel is just trying to ride on the coattails of the original.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of, standing on its own 2 feet.
One critic even said that compared to this film, the first Joker looks like a Charlie Kaufman masterpiece.
Ouch.
I know, right? That's brutal.
Not mincing words at all.
And that actually connects to something else another source pointed out.
What's that?
So they were saying that the sequel depends so much on the ideas from the first film that it kind of forgets to be its own thing. Like, it's so busy trying to be a Joker movie that it forgets to be a good movie.
Interesting. And what do you think? Is it a good movie?
Well, that's the thing, right?
What is a good movie? Even?
It's so subjective.
Exactly. And this film, more than most, really seems to highlight that.
You're right. You're right. Everyone has such different takes.
Yeah, and it's not just about whether you liked it or not. It's about what you took away from it.
You know what else is interesting about that? One source pointed out that the film actually seems to be aware of how people might interpret it.
Self-aware.
Yeah, like, there are characters in the film who represent different ways of seeing the original Joker.
Wow. Like they anticipated the criticism.
Right. And then these characters react negatively to what's happening in the sequel, so it's almost like the film is trying to control how it's interpreted.
That's so meta.
I know, right?
It's like the filmmakers are having a conversation with the audience, but through the film itself.
It's definitely a choice, that's for sure.
A bold one, for sure.
But, it does make you think. And I think ultimately that's what we're trying to do with these deep dives.
Get people thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we've covered a lot of ground here, and honestly, a lot of it hasn't been positive.
That's true. A lot of the reviews haven't exactly been glowing.
But I do think there's this underlying feeling that there's something more to this film, something worth exploring. Like, is it trying to make us think about how we consume art?
Yeah.
Like, is it dangerous to idolize these anti-heroes? Or am I just reading too much into it?
I don't think so, no. In fact, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It seems like Joker, Folie, Deux is more interested in asking those tough questions than giving us easy answers.
Right.
Like, it's holding up this kind of messed up mirror to us and saying, look what you've made.
Wow, yeah.
It's uncomfortable, but I think that's the point.
That's really interesting.
And it all comes back to this idea of, like, the power of these kinds of characters. The Joker represents chaos,
Mm-hmm.
He exposes the cracks in everything. Maybe this film is trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So, yeah, it might not be perfect, but it's still fascinating,
It's definitely a conversation starter.
Definitely. Makes you think about what you watch and how you watch it.
And isn't that what a good deep dive should do?
Exactly. Even if it leaves you with a slightly unsettled feeling.
Food for thought.
Absolutely.
They get off.
All right.
Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive, folks.
Until next time.
Be sure to check back in with us for our next episode. And, as always, thanks for listening.